Hello and welcome to the first in a series of masterclasses about place-based approaches and about the Shaping Places for Wellbeing approach. Um, my name is Irene Buteman. I am the Place and Wellbeing Partnership Lead between the Improvement Service and Public Health Scotland, but I've also been leading on the Shaping Places for Wellbeing approach over the past 3 years and a little bit more than that. What we're going to do today is exactly what that title says. We're going to begin with an introduction to place and what was meant by place and why it matters, what it means to take a place-based approach, and then we will hone in on the Shaping Places for Wellbeing programme approach to place and what we have learnt while we have been working on this programme and the support we've been given. I think an important thing to say at the outset is that as a team that has been delivering the programme and with the stakeholders and all of the steering groups that we've been working with, we have sat back at this point that we are in the programme and evaluated the causes of change. What are the links between the activities that we've been delivering and the outcomes that we want to achieve? And what we have found as we've sat back and evaluated that is that there are better chances of achieving change if we can deliver these aspects sitting here in the bullets. So change is more likely when, for ourselves as a programme, but also for yourself if you wish to pick up and use the learning from the programme, change is more likely when we have a foundational and mutual understanding of place and the relationship to health and inequality, and we'll be covering that. When the understanding of the aims and the offer of the Shaping Places for Wellbeing programme is there and its place-based approach. Again, we will be beginning that understanding of that. Further masterclasses will follow to expand on that. Change is more likely when people can believe that the Shaping Places for Wellbeing approach will add value to their current work. And again, both this masterclass and the following ones will help with that belief and understanding. And also when we can be sure that we're holding realistic expectations about the programme's place-based approach and its impact on system change as well. So that has guided the masterclasses that we are setting up in order to deliver around that, but that's a local system as well. Anyone looking to take up and work around the Shaping Places for Wellbeing approach can be using these masterclasses to assist with delivering on making change more likely. A final thing to say before we get going into the three areas is, who is this really for? Who are we talking to? And to be honest, when we're talking about place and place-based approaches, we're looking at everybody. This is a very high level mapping that we have undertaken within the programme, and it's covering all sectors and it's covering all communities as well. So it's just to highlight that fact that whilst the programme has been jointly delivered by Public Health Scotland and the Improvement Service, this is very much a learning and an activity for all sectors that are involved in the places that we create. All of these presentations will be made available after today as well as the recording. So moving on to what we are dealing with in three different sections. Looking firstly at place, what is it that we mean by place and why does it matter? I would begin with the why does it matter? What is it that is happening at the moment to the people of Scotland? What is happening doesn't make great reading. What is happening is that we have the number of people dying early is increasing. We have people are spending more of their life in ill health, and the gap in life expectancy between the poorest and the wealthiest is growing. And what's worse is that is set to get worse. The forecasts are that will get worse by 21% in the next 20 years. So that is a pretty dire situation that we're in. We have the worst health inequalities in the whole of Western Europe. So how can we stop this happening? And this is where we get into a kind of age-old media approach on how we stop this happening, about how long we're living and our healthy lives, is that we tend to look to the NHS for the answer. And in fact, the NHS and that treatment of people once they're already unwell can only actually start to reverse that trend by about 20%. The further 80% sits with all of those other topics that are sitting below there. They are all the aspects of the places where we live, work and play, and the access to resources and income and housing and our behaviours within those places which are influenced by those places. That is where the real preventative measures sit within our places and how we interact within them. Now, that's well known across Scotland. We have had a recent Health Foundation report that acknowledged the poor state of our health in Scotland and came up with a number of recommendations, primarily saying we don't need another grand strategy. We need to work with what we have got, with the assets that we have, and with all of those sectors that I just highlighted in that WHO slide at the beginning. So we're well aware of the challenge ahead, and the Shaping Places for Wellbeing programme ran concurrently with this work, and we were very pleased that the aspects that we delivered on those key areas in the middle there about having coherent policy streams and cross-sector work. And having a masterclass like this is adopting that success at scale as well. Another Scotland-wide document that recognises the challenges is the Delivering a Future for Scottish Local Authorities. Again, very similar set of themes identified by Solace, all of the chief execs across local government as well, about the need for understanding people's needs and data-informed decisions and so on. So that will come through as we get on to what is in a place-based approach. But there's full acknowledgement of the challenge that we have. We also have the National Planning Framework, the new one, which has a set of new outcomes, and those highlighted in red are very clear about new outcomes that need to be delivered around health and well-being, around improving equality, and then obviously within that link is what is happening to the health of our planet and that reduction of greenhouse gases as well. And then we can come down even to the planning system itself, which has a new purpose defined for it about 5 years ago now, which is that the purpose of the planning system is to manage the development and use of land in the long-term public interest. If there's a planner in the room or listening to this that is thinking, I'm not sure what the long-term public interest is, look at the stats that I just went through in the first few slides there. That's what our long-term public interest has to be, that and looking at what is happening to our climate and to our planet as well. But to highlight there, whilst the National Planning Framework and that purpose for planning may suggest it's all for planning to deliver on this, it isn't. It's definitely got to be everybody that delivers around this. Planning cannot even deliver the National Planning Framework on its own. It needs to be collaborating with all sectors and within different organisations. Another reason for taking a place-based approach has been highlighted very recently by East Ayrshire, where they found themselves in a position, like many councils, with a budget deficit, and they've really grasped the nettle and decided that what they need to do is think about prevention. They need to think differently about public services to help reduce demand and tackle the significant challenges that they face. That includes their ageing population and an increasing demand for services at a time when they have reduced funding and budget cuts. So that preventative role of place, that 80%, is really coming to the fore for cash-strapped councils and other public sector organisations, and all sectors really experiencing that lack of finance and that need to think more preventatively and upstream about what it is that we're doing. A short example then of just how place impacts on our well-being is just taking one small example, so many out there, but this is the moving of a primary school. This is an example of where you've got the local primary school and whoever is the main carer can walk to it, drop their child off, go shopping, drop in an elderly neighbour and go on to work, be that full-time, part-time work, whatever. When we move a primary school for the very, very best of intentions, to get a cheaper site, to build a better school with better facilities that's more sustainable, all done with the very best of intentions, what we can lead to doing is that in order to get your child to school, you're needing to think about a bus journey or a car journey, potentially buying a car or a second car in order to do that. And then having dropped that child off, you're having to make different decisions. It's all about the behaviour in place that we're talking about. So you may choose that what you have to do is go go to the shop and drop off something on an elderly neighbour with an elderly neighbour, especially if that's a relative. But that may have a knock-on impact that you haven't got the time in the day to then fit in that part-time job. Or you can make it to work, but that supporting of your neighbours and your relatives in their own homes starts to be the thing that has to give. So just that one example alone means that locally, that local school and the place that we create means that two care roles and work can be managed. We can age in place. We can manage complex journeys with less stress on our minds and our bodies. We have more physical activity, mental health and cognitive skills. We enhance community cohesion, people walking to school and hanging out at the school gate. Local viability, business viability goes up as people walk and use businesses in the area instead of being on a bus or in a car. We help with that 20% reduction in car kilometres, help air quality. And a crucial one is that half of all our households in deprived areas have no access to a car. So we're exacerbating the inequality at times. And we can also be adding to in-work poverty where people need to buy a car or buy an extra car in order to deliver and move through that simple part of the day. So just one example there. There are many others. And it's captured here in this statement back as far as 2012 in Scottish Government's Making Healthy Places document, saying obesity, inactivity, depression and loss of community has not happened to us. Rather, we have legislated, subsidised and planned it. And I would emphasise that we haven't done that deliberately. We have done that with the very best of intentions, such as the new primary school, but we haven't always been aware of the unintended consequences. And a place-based approach is really about highlighting those unintended consequences of the actions that we're taking. So to clarify, every place that we create can have a positive or negative impact on our well-being and on inequalities. Every place is very, very different. They tend to, well, they always have the standard things. There's the physical place itself, there's the financial, the investment in land and buildings, the jobs that we do in those places, and more these days, there's the online aspect of place, the impact on our town centres of retail shopping, of working from home. All of that circles around and has an impact on people and how they behave in their place, and that in turn impacts on their well-being and can exacerbate or help with inequalities. Another thing to highlight there is when we're talking about place, there is no scale to this. The place can be the street outside your window right now, or it can be the whole of Scotland. Place is simply about that interaction and how it impacts on us. The place outside our street will have a bigger impact because we interact with it more, but so does our entire council area or the whole of Scotland have that impact also at times. So I'm going to move on now to look at then, if that is the case, if we've established how important our places are in helping with that 80% of the issues that we need to address with our ill health and the inequalities and the health of our planet, then what does it mean when we talk about taking a place-based approach in order to be considering the impact that we're having on people and on place? So for ourselves within the Shaping Places for Wellbeing programme, that has always been about three key elements that we need to be considering. We need to be thinking about people. What are they experiencing in their place? We need to be thinking about the place itself. What are all the features that have a positive impact on those people, or as we know, could have a negative impact? So we want to focus on those positive features that we want to deliver in every place. And then we need to look at how do we bring both of those far more into our decision making, because all of our decisions are impacting on those people and on places and on those people as well. So taking that place-based approach within the Shaping Places for Wellbeing programme, which I'll come on to in a little moment, has meant looking at data. It's meant looking at data on who is experiencing inequality in our communities, because we're not all dying young, we're not all suffering for years with ill health. Let's look at those that are, let's learn from what the hard quantitative factual data tells us, but then crucially, let's check with those that we know are experiencing inequality what they feel. So that qualitative community insight. And the place standard tool, it comes to the fore. It's not the only tool to do that, but it's a particularly good tool. When it comes to place and those features, what we have already in Scotland is a set of place and wellbeing outcomes. And I'll come on to those in a minute with a little bit more detail. And then when it comes to the decision-making processes, we've been using place and wellbeing assessments, briefing papers, leadership and governance, and supporting that to be taking account of place and to be considering that more, just as I said, East Ayrshire are already stepping up and looking at doing. So the place and wellbeing outcomes themselves are an absolute anchor for the work that we have been doing and for the Shaping Places for Wellbeing approach. They were developed by the Place and Wellbeing Collaborative. You can see the organisations there that are represented on that group. And that group came together in 2019 when we had that new definition, the National Planning Framework coming forward and so on. And we could see that shared ambition to improve the places where we live, work and relax. And we came together to see what we could be delivering better together and joining up councils with health and working more in a more collaborative fashion, thus the name collaborative. So one of the first tasks that that collaborative did was to identify that set of place and wellbeing outcomes. These outcomes are not based on a workshop with 40 people in the room for an afternoon who all came up with their thoughts and it was all kind of agreed and facilitated. No, this is an evidenced set of preventative features that every place needs to enable. The evidence was pulled together to shape the questions in the place standard tool, which is used as a means of collecting that qualitative information, but it also stands that test of shaping the outcomes that we need to achieve in every place. And doing so enables the well-being of people, equality and the delivery of net zero emissions and sustainability. So effectively delivering on that triple win that we don't have the time to deal with all of these crises at once. If we're looking to embed the place and wellbeing outcomes, then we are delivering on them all at once. They map across this is taken from the Town and Country Planning Association document, looking at the kind of planning interventions, and what they sort of show is that bridge to when we make decisions to do these sorts of interventions, what it does is it changes people's behaviour. When we change people's behaviour, we have an impact on their health and we have an impact on our planet. And if we're aware of who's experiencing the particular inequalities, we can have an impact on reducing those inequalities as well. The place and wellbeing outcomes themselves, there's more information about them on the Improvement Service website, and I will be putting the links up to that at the very end of the session today. What they do is they also help to deliver on the asks that we've already got. So the top two rows there is just a very short collection of asks, and I would say with that 20-minute neighbourhood, it's far more these days about local living rather than getting hung up on a 20-minute aspiration. What's important though is that we're right back to Christie Commission. We're right back to thinking preventatively, to thinking about the collaborating and working together to deliver on the place principle, to deliver on the social determinants of health, which are simply the places where we live, work and play and the impact they have. And the place and wellbeing outcomes help us, and embedding them into decision making help us to deliver on all of those. So finally, to get then to the Shaping Places for Wellbeing programme itself, and what our approach has been and how we've used those three key elements that I've already gone through. So the programme itself had that overall ambition up there in the green to improve Scotland's wellbeing by reducing significant inequality in the health of its people while addressing the health of our planet. And in the purple at the bottom, it was anchored in the embedment of those place and wellbeing outcomes. But the work that we've been in and doing has been in that blue band that runs along the middle. So that blue band that runs along the middle has involved locally giving support, working with councils and NHS boards in 7 project towns that are listed there on the left-hand side. And in a moment, I'll explain how we've supported those 3 key elements of a place-based approach and our Shaping Places for Wellbeing approach in those towns. But an important aspect to highlight is that has not been the only activity. What we have also done is had that middle band of a local learning cohort. Now that has involved the staff, the funding that the programme got from the Health Foundation and from Scottish Government, allowed us to put in a project lead and a community link lead in all of these towns, in each of them, to be working and supporting the approach that we were taking. And what we were able to do was to bring those people together to reflect monthly, to learn from each other and to share between the towns. Equally, we brought together all of our steering groups on a quarterly basis, I think it was, in order for them to hear and gain confidence from each other. What that led to was the production of how-to guides to enable others to take the approach and the support that we've given in those towns and to run with it. And those tools I'll refer to later, and they're on the website. But it also gave confidence between towns in the changes that they were delivering. And it also allowed us to identify those causes of change that I identified way back at the beginning there in my second slide about how we need to make sure people are understanding the connection between place and well-being, and to understand fully the Shaping Places for Wellbeing approach as well. On the right-hand side, we also had a national leadership cohort of those organisations listed so that we could take any issues from a local perspective that we felt were maybe more national barriers. So we had that link up to the national organisations as well. So what we did as the Shaping Places for Wellbeing approach is that slide that I referred to earlier. We looked at data, quantitative and qualitative, crucial that it be both. We used the place and wellbeing outcomes and the evidence that sat behind them, and we used place and wellbeing assessments and briefing papers, and that then led on to conversations about leadership and governance in those places that we were supporting. So looking at people, what we did was we went in and we produced a data profile, a hard, factual, quantitative data profile that highlighted the population groups that were most experiencing inequality in the project town that we were working in. And then crucially, for those that are not data literate, which is myself, we have produced an infographic, an easy to read highlight of who's experiencing inequality in this area, something that can be taken into the next meeting and continued into the meeting 2 weeks later, and you've still got it fresh in your mind, but can also inform all of the documents that are listed in the green circle below as well, and inform many others, and committee reports and funding applications and so on. Having done that hard, factual, quantitative data, we looked at the community. Our community link leads produced a more qualitative report, sense checking that with those that were experiencing inequality and identifying what they felt they needed from their place. So we worked with frontline community groups and frontline staff that were working with those experiencing inequality to capture that. And again, we produced an easy to read visual of that could be taken into the decision making of all different plans and documents, not just something that's been done to produce one document alone and then perhaps gets lost after that when the next document's being produced by a different part of an organisation and so on, or a different sector. When it comes to our use of the place and wellbeing outcomes, well, we already had those. They were an anchor in our start. So we simply used those and highlighted the evidence that sits behind them and the strength of that evidence. Because what it means is you don't have to go in and make an intervention in a place and then wait 15 years to see if it did improve health and wellbeing and then say, oh, it was us that made that difference. It actually means you can say, we've got the evidence, we've got the research that when we do this intervention, this is what happens. So again, giving confidence to the system, to decision makers, and the interventions that they can make and the impact that we'll have. When it comes to bringing all of that into decision making, what we did was we undertook place and wellbeing assessments. Now, these were half-day sessions bringing together a range of perspectives in the room, as much of a range of those, the who's slide that I had up at the very beginning, into the room in order to not just look at different strategies, plans and proposals from the point of view of only the writer, but to broaden their perspective and to broaden their thoughts about One, how is the plan, policy or decision that they're about to make, how is it going to impact on each of the features that we need to get right in a place? How is it impacting on the different population groups that we've identified already are most impacted by inequalities? And what could be done to improve its impact on place and thus improve its impact on people and their well-being as well? So very quick sessions, and what over the course of the time that we have been in and supporting the 7 towns, this is the range of place and wellbeing assessments that we've completed. Now, I highlight that just to show that if you look at the top left, three bullets down, you can see we did an assessment of the NHS Forth Valley Healthcare Strategy, right up there at a regional level. Whereas if you go right over to the right-hand side, third bullet down, then we also looked and went in and supported the Burnhill Neighbourhood Plan. So this was a plan that a deprived part of Rutherglen had produced, and they wanted to update it. And we went in and assessed that with them in their community building, in their community. So a full scale of an ability to go in and undertake a place and wellbeing assessment, and also a full scale there around health and social care partnerships, councils, and so on, and third sector that we went in and undertook assessments with. At the end of each assessment, a report was produced that captured the conversation, really. What did people in the room think could be done differently by that plan, strategy or proposal? Still to deliver on its own overall aim, but to make sure that we were thinking about those unintended consequences. There was nothing saying that these had to be applied. It was simply to expand the thinking of those making the decisions, so that we were bringing people in place into that decision-making process. Another way that we did this was using place and wellbeing outcome briefings. So that pulled together all of the evidence that we were aware of that sits behind the place and wellbeing outcomes, and the data, that quantitative and qualitative data, into one document, into one 3-page document that could then be shared around with elected members, community groups, other organisations, third sector, so that everybody had a better understanding of that connection between place and its impact on the well-being of people and planet, and therefore would have that again in their minds when making decisions as they moved forward. To close then, just a little bit on our impact and our sharing. As I said earlier, as a result of us having that learning network, we have produced resources to help anyone else to take the Shaping Places for Wellbeing approach, how-to guides on preparing your qualitative data, quantitative data, and how to undertake a place and wellbeing assessment guide as well. We've shared many impact stories on the website also, so those give confidence to how the different aspects can be applied of our approach and the impact that they've had. I've pulled out some very high to sort of more local level, but these are literally just trying to pull a few out to bring to life for you. Aberdeenshire Council are now rolling out the approach across the whole of their council. South Ayrshire have embedded the outcomes into their council business plan. South Lanarkshire are looking at embedding the approach into their local development plan and the neighbourhood plans as they're moving forward and undertaking them. Dunoon Community Development Trust are looking at using that approach to inform their impending place plan, and the Dalkeith and Woodburn Local Community Plan is structured around those outcomes and embedding those outcomes as all the things that there's an aspiration to have delivered in that place. So for the moment, the Shaping Places for Wellbeing programme sits and the support that it can give sits at 3 levels. We have that website resource that has all of the tools that I've just been referring to. We have this national learning cohort, which is literally beginning today with these masterclasses. And then at the moment, until the end of the year, I am fortunate enough to still have a fantastic team around me who can assist with giving bespoke support for any of these areas that we've just been going through that make up the overall approach. So as we move forward, what we will have is a series of 3 further masterclasses that will go into a deeper dive on those 3 areas of any of our approach: place, people, and decision making. And following that, what we want to do is then start to bring things alive. Where have these place-based approaches, where have they developed in action? Some of the examples that I cited earlier, deeper dive into those so that we can learn about how that was done and gain confidence within our own systems to move forward with them as well. What we'll also be doing is looking at that hard, factual, quantitative data that we pull together. Can we make sure that everybody in Scotland has better access to that? We'll be looking at that community insight, that qualitative data, and bringing it into decision making. How do we make that more easily done for all of Scotland? And then also at the request of our steering groups, we'll be giving strength and support to planning authorities now that they are in the process of their local development plans as well. So I shall end by saying an ounce of practice is worth more than tons of preaching. I do feel I have preached for a little while. Apologies. I do hope that you can move forward and see where you can put this into practice, though, and give it a go and get in touch if we can be helping at all. Here's the links that I referred to, both to the outcomes themselves and to the Shaping Places for Wellbeing programme. And you can follow us on social media, and then that's the mailbox at the very bottom if you wish to get in touch also. And thank you very much for your time.